This is Time Signatures with Jim Ervin, a podcast and radio program presented by the Capital Area Blues Society in Lansing, Michigan. Most any contemporary musical style can trace its roots back to the blues. Time Signatures explores the blues and its musical connections with captivating interviews, lively discussions, and news from the world of the blues.
You know I'm trying, baby, driving up and down these Michigan roads, yeah.
And now, here he is, your host, Jim Ervin.
Well, hello there, and welcome to Time Signatures. I'm your host, Jim Ervin, and today's guest is the very definition of winning it all, almost losing it all, and then winning it all again. He began his career in music in the 1960s and 70s when he relocated to L.A. and became the sideman for John Lee Hooker, Percy Mayfield, Big Mama Thornton, Joe Tex, and many others. Between 1981 and 1984, he became the lead guitarist for the band Canned Heat. Between 1984 and 89, our guest joined forces with John Mayall's Blues Breakers, and he toured worldwide with the band. Leaving the Blues Breakers in 1989, he formed the Walter Trout Band and thus began the climb upward. He enjoyed success in the blues, touring many blues festivals across the globe. But in 2013, our guest learned that he had developed cirrhosis of the liver. We're going to talk more about that in a few minutes, but let's welcome longtime blues musician and a true walking, talking miracle, blues rock's resilient icon, Walter Trout. Walter, welcome to Time Signature, sir.
Well, it's great to be here, and that was a really good introduction you did there, Irv. That was
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Now, I would be remiss if I didn't talk about your new CD, Broken. So trust me, we're going to talk about that in a few moments. But I want to start our discussion with the story of how you found your way into the blues. Where did it start for you?
Boy, I can go way back and say that when I was a little kid, I really thought I wanted to be a jazz trumpet player. And I started studying the trumpet seriously when I was about 5. And I actually played the trumpet all the way through high school. I played in the marching band and the orchestra, and I was the first chair trumpeter in the orchestra and reading charts, and we were playing Beethoven and stuff. But even the whole time I was playing that, I was kind of slowly moving in a different direction. And one of the, when I was 10, I actually got to spend the day and hang out with Duke Ellington and his orchestra.
Oh, man.
I got a trumpet lesson from the great Cat Anderson, who was the guy in the orchestra, the trumpet player who played everything 2 octaves higher. And he tried to show me his embouchure on the trumpet. And times were different then because he and I were passing his trumpet back and forth and I was playing it, which we wouldn't do now, right? But
wow.
That was a big day for me. But I started moving in different directions in that it was the late 50s. And I remember riding in the car with my parents and they would have the AM radio on, and on would come Little Richard and Chuck Berry. And I'd be like, wow, I like this stuff,
Yeah.
But the whole guitar thing started when I was about 10. And my brother loved music. So did my whole family. Both my parents loved music. And they were always taking me to jazz clubs. And my dad used to take me to these black jazz clubs in Atlantic City. And but my brother came home and he goes, I know you like jazz. He goes, but there's something going on with this guy. I want you to check it out. And it was the first Bob Dylan album. And I was really taken with the simplicity of the songs, but how much they had to say and the sound of his voice. And it was just groundbreaking back then. I had never heard anything like that. I was 10 years old, and I listened to it and listened to it. And then again, my brother comes home and says, hey, I got you an acoustic guitar. and he hands me a guitar, and so um, I remember the first day he brought it home. It was not tuned at all. And I sat down and I started strumming the thing. I didn't even put my left hand on the neck. I just started strumming as hard as I could and singing. And it was this god awful racket. And my brother runs in and says, Mom says if you don't learn how to tune that thing and learn a couple of chords, she's going to throw it in the trash. Because I was driving them out of the house. But I was discovering this thing, right?
Sure.
So I figured out how to tune it, and I got a book of chords, the Mel Bay chord book, and started learning these very simple songs and enjoying it very much. And then the nuclear attack was February the 9th, 1964. I was 13, and it was the Beatles on Ed Sullivan.
Oh, man.
And suddenly I was like, oh my God, I've got to get an electric guitar. And my family was very, very dysfunctional. And there was a lot of bad things kind of going on by this time. My parents had divorced and they had both remarried. And they had both remarried people that were not good people. And there was violence. And I looked at the Beatles and I saw these guys look like a family. And I think if I can get into a band, that can be a family.
Sure.
They were looking at each other and smiling like they had these little secrets among themselves. And so I got a cheap electric guitar and started really kind of going for that. And I started jamming with some friends of mine. And then once again, Big Bro comes home and goes, I know you like electric guitar music. You've got to hear this dude and you better sit down because when you hear this guy, you're going to fall over. And this was it for me. It was the first album by Paul Butterfield, and it had Mike Bloomfield. It's the album that starts with Born in Chicago.
Sure.
And at that time, that was 1965. And for guitar solos, we were used to Keith Richard and George Harrison, and they were very simple and very pretty. And then here was this guy playing with this rock and roll aggression and playing really fast and fiery. And it was, nobody played like him in 1965. And that did it. I remember hearing that and I thought, well, that's what I want to do for the rest of my life. And by the time I was 15 or 16, I told my mother, I'm going to be a blues guitar player, and that's all I care about. And I dropped out of school and went for it. And God bless her, because she was on the faculty of my high school. And now her son becomes a high school dropout.
Oh, boy.
And she always said to me, I hear you playing in your bedroom, and I think you can do it. I think you've got the talent. So go for it with everything you've got. And she always supported that in me. She never gave me the, get a real job or that's a pipe dream.
Yeah.
She said, you know what? I think you can do it. And so there's how I ended up doing this, and when I told her I'm going to be a blues guitarist, I never looked back. And when I went into school, it was my senior year, I went in to quit. And the guidance counselor goes, why are you quitting? And I go, I'm going to be a blues guitar player. And believe me, in South Jersey, in this little farm town, nobody had heard that one before. That was a new one on them.
Wow.
So there was a long-winded answer to your question.
No. I love answers like that. It's wonderful. I want to talk a little bit about your time out in LA and your work as sideman with the late great John Lee Hooker. That must have really been something to find yourself in such company so earlier in your blues career, yes?
This is another thing, you've heard the story about being the right place at the right time.
Yes, sir.
I was in a band in Costa Mesa, California, and we were a club band, and we were doing top 40 songs and cover songs and Beatles and Rolling Stones and Santana, and we were doing Eagles and stuff. And this friend of mine said, "Hey, up on the Redondo Beach Pier on Sunday afternoons, there's these older black fellows, and all they do is play blues. And I know that
Wow.
you love to play blues." And, I was playing this cover music to make a living. I was playing with them 5 nights a week, and we had a residency in a nice nightclub. I was doing fine. And so he said, "I told them about you and asked them if you come up Sunday, if you can sit in." So I went up there, and there they were. And they said, "Okay, you can play one song." I played a song. They said, "Well, hey, play another one." I played another one. They said, "Why don't you stay up for the set?" I stayed up for the set. They said, "Do you want to join the band?" It
Wow.
happened to be John Lee Hooker's backup band. Without
Oh,
him, this was their steady gig on the Redondo Beach Pier every Sunday. So with those guys, it was Finest Tasby and Deacon Jones. And Deacon was John Lee Hooker's band leader. He had also been Freddie King's band leader. He had
mm,
started with Curtis Mayfield in the Impressions. And Finest Tasby went on to be the lead singer of the Manish Boys, and Deacon, and I mean, Finest had been the bass player with Freddie King. So these guys were the real deal. And
yeah.
then I really started learning from them. I quit the club band and started playing with these guys all the time. And with those guys, is how I got to play with John Lee Hooker and Big Mama Thornton and Joe Tex and Percy Mayfield and Lowell Folsom, Eddie
Wow.
Cleanhead Vinson. All these guys would come to LA and they would hire this band to back them up. And I was the guitarist, and it was an amazing educational experience for me. And by
Uh,
playing with those guys at a legendary club in Hermosa Beach called the Lighthouse. It's legendary. I think
okay.
Miles Davis had done a live album there, but I was playing with them, and some fellas came in one night and said, "Would you join our band?" It was Canned Heat, and by playing with Canned
Wow.
Heat, I got heard by John Mayall. So what I'm saying is that whole thing started by going to that jam session on the pier on that Sunday afternoon.
That's
That
crazy.
changed my entire life that day.
Yeah.
Experience. Some of those guys that I got to play with were sort of more fun than others. And I would say of all of those really originators of the blues that I got to play with, I think Big Mama Thornton was the most fun. Um, a great story with, John Lee Hooker. I had a really good time, but I didn't last all that long because uh, I don't know. I felt like I couldn't really communicate with him very well, and I did my best, but I just felt like we didn't communicate with each other very well. I did a bunch of shows with him, and it was fine. And I
Yeah.
was playing with Finest and Deacon, who were dear friends of mine. As a matter of fact, I think Deacon Jones's final record he ever played on was on my album, We're All in This Together. He's on the cut that I did with Kenny Wayne Shepherd.
Oh,
But
wow.
Big Mama Thornton was really fun. She treated me great. She gave me a lot of respect. Um, but the story I love telling her about her was, Deacon calls me and says, "Okay, we got a gig with Big Mama tonight." I go, "Okay, yeah, let's go." I show up. I'm the only guy there in the dressing room under 85 years old.
Oh, man.
Um, we're not going to rehearse. So I say, "Hi, Big Mama, my name is Walter. I'm going to play guitar with you. And because we're not rehearsing, what are we going to do?" Now, here's the true story, Irv. She looks at me and she says, "Walter, all you got to do is play like B.B. King." She goes, I don't want to hear no rock and roll, and I don't want to hear no psychedelic. Yeah, I go, okay. So we're up there, we're playing a slow blues. And she goes, ladies and gentlemen, now this boy over here is going to try to play like B.B. King. And I did my best impression of B.B. King, and she gave me a big smile. And she yelled my name to the audience, and she told me she loved me. So
Wow.
that was a big evening for me because she
Yeah.
was one of the originators, right? And she didn't know me. And so I had a great time with her. I can tell you a little story about Joe Tex. His family might not like me to tell you this, but we did a gig. After the gig, he opened up this suitcase full of money, and it was counterfeit. And he told us it's counterfeit. And he said, don't that money look good? Boy, this money looks good. And he handed me $40. And I said, because I was supposed to make $40. And he said, here's your 40. I said, hey, if you're going to give me fake money, give me $1,000. He says, well, you said you'd work for $40. And I said, well, yeah, but this is fake. This is counterfeit money. And he goes, well, that money looks good. You can spend it. And so I didn't do any more shows with him. That was my one evening with Joe Tex. And me and my girlfriend at the time, we went and we had to pass these $20 bills. We were broke. $40 was a lot of money. So we went around Huntington Beach and we found the convenience store that had the darkest lighting behind the counter. And I went and bought a pack of gum and gave the guy $20 and he gave me the change. And so I was, that's a federal offense, man.
Well, yeah.
That's why I don't want to go work with this guy anymore. But I got to say, I had a great time those years. I was a sideman and I was respected by all of them. And I had just a great time. It was, I look back on it with a lot of love, and it's kind of some legendary romantic times for me in my life,
Sure. Well, you're watching and listening to Time Signatures. I'm your host, Jim Ervin. Along with us today is bluesman Walter Trout. We're talking about his early days in the blues, and we're going to be talking about his new CD here momentarily. But Walter, I want to turn the page a little bit and bring us forward to 2013 when you started seeing the first signs of cirrhosis. Now, undoubtedly, this was a really tough time in your life. In 2014, you got your liver transplant, but you had some severe complications as you were recovering from that surgery. Talk about that period of time, would you?
Well, when you talk about me getting the symptoms, they had actually been coming on for a long time, maybe 8, 9 years. I had been having equilibrium problems on stage, and I had really sort of severe fatigue all the time. I was just fatigued, and playing gigs became really difficult for me. I even got to where I was playing sitting down so that I wouldn't fall down. And we didn't know what was wrong. We just figured I'm getting old, even though this was, it's been 10 years since the transplant. But so this was more like 14 or 15 years ago. I was like, 60 years old, something like that. And I figured I'm getting old. Maybe I'm washed up. I can't do this anymore. I was getting incredible cramps in my hands when I would play, and I would get to where I couldn't play the guitar. So I would have my bass player, he would play the guitar. I would play the harmonica because I was the harmonica player for a couple of years in Canned Heat. And, my tour manager would play the bass and I would play the harmonica till the cramps went away. And then I'd try the guitar again. And it was terrifying to be on
I can
stage,
imagine.
truly terrifying. And finally, I got checked out and they said, well, you're probably going to need a transplant. We were like, no, that can't be. So really started eating organic food and trying to do all this, and it didn't work. And I ended up getting put in the hospital, and I was in there for 8 months. And I lost 120 pounds. I
Mm.
developed severe brain damage. I lost the ability to speak. I didn't recognize my wife or my kids. And at the last minute, right before I was going to croak, they found a liver match and gave me the transplant. But
Wow.
then they were unable to hook up the bile duct properly. So after they had stapled me up, I started leaking bile into my abdomen. And so I started digesting my own organs.
Oh,
And that was so painful, they kind of put me in my own part of the hospital so that I could scream for 12 hours because they couldn't give me pain meds because my blood pressure was like nothing. And it took them 3 tries. They opened me up 3 times that week, and then they finally got the bile duct hooked up. But then
wow.
I had to get speech therapy. I had to relearn how to talk. I had to get physical therapy for months and relearn how to use my legs. I started in a wheelchair and progressed through that to, a walker and crutches um, and I did have, as I said, learn how to talk. But then, once I could kind of speak and walk, they sent me home. And then my son, John came walking in. I'm sitting on the couch and he walked in with a Stratocaster and a beautiful, loving smile on his face and handed me the guitar and said, "Here, Dad." And I held the guitar and realized it had been wiped clean from my memory, what to do with it. So it was my wife who told me, well, I go, I don't know what to do. This is all I've done since I was a teenager. And she goes, well, you have to start over again. So I did. And I, 6, 7 hours a day, every day for a year, I taught
Wow.
myself all over again.
Man. Listening to your music now, especially knowing this backstory and the uphill battle that you waged to come back, I got to tell you, man, I'm awestruck. Um, Honestly, when I called you a walking, talking miracle at the Open, that was genuine. But looking back now, that's some story, yeah.
Well, yeah, it was something to go through. And then after the music came back, I figured I hadn't been on a stage in 2.5, almost 3 years. And I figured I should try a gig and see what happened and what would happen. And most guys would go down to the corner pub, the corner bar, try playing and see what happens. Me, I went to Royal Albert Hall in London and to see
Talk
what
about
was
grabbing
going
the
to
bull by the
happen.
horns.
Well, that was intense. But I'll tell you, as soon as I walked out, my wife introduced me. It's actually on YouTube. You can see it. It's under the phrase Marie Trout, RAH. So Marie Trout, Royal Albert Hall. She brought me out. I came out there, and when I turned to the band and counted to 4 and started the song, I thought to myself, I've done this 10,000 times and I'm at home. And I did just fine. Soon as
Man.
that band kicked in behind me, I was, okay, I got it, you know. But it was heavy. And it's still very difficult for me to watch that video on YouTube.
Yeah, that's I got to tell you, that hits you in the feels when you realize what you had gone through, and there you are, you're back on it.
Yeah.
Now, just a little over a year after your transplant, you got deeply involved in several organizations that help those in need of transplants. How did that come about? And I would assume you're still involved.
Of course, we're still involved. We do benefits for Donate Life, which is the organization here in the States. we're patrons of the British Liver Trust. We also work with the Danish transplant organization and the Norwegian transplant organization.
Wow.
And we do fundraisers for all of them. And so that I feel like I have to give back because I feel like it is really, I can't understand why I'm still here. And the only thing I could, because I was in that bed for 8 months and there were
Yes, sir.
guys dying in that liver ward every day. They were bringing new guys in, carrying old people, old guys out that had not made it. And there I was. I was there for months and months. And, I had brain damage. I didn't recognize my kids. I was gone, man.
Yeah.
And, but all I can come up with is that when I do these gigs and I have a room full of people, I'm now an evangelist, and what I preach is organ donation. And
Yes,
I
sir.
tell them my story. And I tell them, if you want to do something good for your fellow man, you want to do something good for humanity in this day and age we live in where human life doesn't seem to be worth a lot. It seems to mean a little less every day out there in the world, but you can do something good. All you got to do is sign up and be a donor. And there's 120,000 people in America on the waiting list. Every month we lose maybe 1,500 to 2,000 of them because they can't get the organ they need, and that is a travesty.
Yeah.
So I figure that is why I've been kept here. And you can call it a superstition, but I feel the day I stop doing that at my shows, I'll be taken.
Well, yeah, listen, I am a donor because of my mom. I don't know if you ever got to meet your donor's family. My mother did. She reached out to the family and they agreed to meet with her. Ironically, it was when they unveiled the memorial quilt the following year. And my mom and I and my sister actually helped create the panel for that quilt for Desiree. And I get it. I
Yeah,
completely get it.
yeah. And
Um,
I have an audience every night.
yeah,
And most times when I'm on these tours, I'll do that rap at a gig, and the next day somebody will send me a message. Hey, I never thought about being a donor,
yeah.
but I listened to you last night, and today I'm going to sign up. And that means the world to me.
Well, I'm gonna collect the information from your wife because I've got her email, and I will make sure this is part of our program when we post it for the
Yeah.
organizations that you work with, because it would be an honor for me to help get the word out about that. Since 2015, you've stacked up a lot of incredible work, Walter. This latest album, Broken, is truly some of your best work, in my opinion. In the title track with Beth Hart speaks so strongly to anybody that's going through transplant surgery or looking at it, or, maybe just somebody that has a major uphill battle that faces them. Would you agree?
Yes, completely. I hadn't really, when I wrote the tune, I hadn't really thought about the transplant thing, but you're completely correct with that. I started off, let me go back to how that song came about.
Sure.
There was a song 2 albums ago called All Out of Tears, and I wrote that song with a great blues singer, Miss Teeny Tucker, and with my wife Marie. And Teeny had lost her son. So I said, let's write a song about grief and let's dedicate it to the memory of your son. And we did it on the album,
Wow.
and we dedicated it to her boy. And it's called All Out of Tears. It ended up winning the Blues Award in Memphis for Song of the Year. But there was
Man.
a line in there. It's a pretty intense song because it's about grief. And there was a line in there that said, I know I'm broken, which had to do with the grief. But every time I sang that every night, I thought, I've got to do a song that says, yeah, I'm broken, but I don't want to be. I want to get past this.
Yes.
And then I sat down to try to write it, and I started thinking about that, I don't mind discussing this. I spent a couple of years in Los Angeles as a heroin addict. I spent years as an alcoholic and a drug addict, and I got sober 37 years ago after Carlos Santana did a 3-day intervention on me. And
Wow.
so I started thinking about those days. There was a time, even for over a year, where I didn't even play guitar. I ran around LA doing drug deals, and so I started thinking about that. And I started thinking about, not only did I go to meetings and go into therapy also to get sober, but I had a lot of mental things left over from stuff I went through as a kid with my parents'
Sure.
divorce and
Sure.
with some of the violence that was in the place I lived. And so I had been through therapy, and I thought I was a broken, lost person. And I started writing about that. And I got not very far with it, and it became too close. I started reliving things, and I just hit a wall. I hit a block. And my wife was in Denmark at the time. I was in California, and she is an award-winning songwriter. She helped me write the song that won Song of the Year. And she and I have
Wow.
already written by then maybe 10 songs together, really good songs, I thought. But I called her up and I said, this is what I'm trying to write, and I'm stuck. And about an hour later, she sent me these incredible lyrics. So 60% of that song lyrically is her. She said to me,
Wow.
she goes, I've never been a drug addict or an alcoholic, but I know all the stories you've told me. I
Sure.
know what you went through, and I'm going to write something about that. And um, so she sent me these lyrics. So I put them all together. I did a demo of the tune, and I sent it off to Beth, who's a friend of mine. And Beth has been through a lot in her life. And we've had some good discussions about it over the years, about what we've both been through. I sent her the song, and she called me the next day and she said, I've only heard the first two verses, and I've got to sing this song with you. She didn't even get past the guitar solo, and she called me up. And
Man.
so she came in the studio and we did the tune together. And the next day after we did the tune, she sent me a beautiful video. And she said, Walter, for the rest of my life, I will look back on what we did yesterday as something really special. And
And it really comes across that way when you listen to the song. I mean, there's a deep connection between the two of you on that song.
well, we both have been through it.
Sure.
We
Sure.
both been through a lot. And
Yeah.
so I'm very, very proud of that song. And I
As you
tell
should
my
be.
wife that at the end of when I get to where I can't do this anymore, or if I'm on my deathbed or something, you and we can be proud of that tune we wrote. She wrote two other songs. She wrote three of the songs on the album with me. And but that song, I sing it every night with my band, and every night it's difficult, you know. I live it, you
Yeah.
know.
Yeah. I can imagine. Well, Walter, where can people find your CDs, your touring information, and how to book you?
Well, I have a website. It's waltertrout.com. That's one word. And the touring information is on there. I have a web store with, I was kind of, I felt a little bad, but I also felt really good that when the CD was released, the web store sold out of it really quick. And
Wow.
people were sending me, hey, we can't get it. And I'm like, well, they've made another order, but they have to wait. That kind of felt good. Yeah, it sold out. It debuted on the Billboard Blues chart at number one. And it's still, I think, at number 3 this week. And if they want to know, my tour dates are also on there. And how to book me, I am booked in America by the Kurland Agency in Boston. That's Kurland. And they have a lot of great people. They have Bobby Rush and Marcia Ball and Elvin Bishop and Bella Fleck and Wynton Marsalis. It's a good agency I'm with. So all they got to do is call them. I am booked now through December, though, I have to say. I got a really busy year coming up.
Yes, you do. Yes, you do. Well, once again, the album is called Broken, and it looks like you might get a chance to catch Walter Trout in the United States later this summer. I know he's going over to Europe coming next week, as a matter of fact. But
Yeah.
you really should pick up a copy of the CD today. It's good stuff. It really is. Walter Trout, thank you so much for joining us today on Time Signatures. Godspeed, safe travels. We really hope to see you soon.
Thank you, Irv. Thanks for having me on your show. I appreciate it, and I appreciate what you do for this kind of music. Thank you.
Well, thank you indeed. It's a pleasure. And that wraps up another edition of Time Signatures with Jim Ervin. We want to thank each and every one of you for taking time to view and or listen to the podcast. After all, we wouldn't be here if it wasn't for your support. Jim Ervin reminding you that keeping the blues alive is everyone's responsibility, but preserving the history of the blues one story at a time, that's my mission. Until next time, be well. We'll see you soon.
Bye-bye.
This has been Time Signatures with Jim Ervin, presented by the Capital Area Blues Society in Lansing, Michigan. For more information on cabs, visit capitalareablues.org. You can find this episode and past episodes at lccconnect.org. The Time Signatures theme song, Michigan Roads, is used by permission and was written by Root Doctor, featuring Freddie Cunningham.
You know I'm trying, baby, driving up and down these Michigan roads, yeah.
Until next time, keep on keeping the blues alive.